Today we're taking a deep dive into tuning carburetors, specifically with fuel mixture screws. Here's a quick timestamp list for all of the sections that I'll be covering today, in case you need to jump ahead to a certain part of the process. An easy way to confirm if you have a fuel mixture screw is by its location on the body of the carb. If it's on the engine side of the slide, it always meters fuel with only a few exceptions. When in doubt, check the screw, and if it's pointy and has an O-ring, then it meters fuel. If you have one with an air mixture screw, you'll still get a lot from this information, but you can also check out my video focusing on those types of carbs. We'll be working with a constant velocity style carb because they almost all have fuel mixture screws. So before we get started, it'll help to understand the basic principles of how CV carbs work. The big difference in these is that there is no mechanical connection between the throttle you twist and the slides in the carbs. Instead, twisting the throttle opens butterfly valves in the carb body, which allows the engine to suck more air through the venturi. When this happens, air on the top of the slide diaphragm is sucked out through a hole in the bottom of the slide, creating a vacuum that pulls the slide up by a specific amount. This results in a slide that can raise and lower very accurately in response to the engine's vacuum pulses. You can see this in action when you rev the engine and watch as the slide flutters up and down with each pulse. Another key component to proper slide movement in CV carbs is the spring tension that always pushes down on the slide. This works against the vacuum to keep the slide from raising too much and ensuring it closes quickly. One common thing to look for when working on these carbs is the condition of the slide diaphragms. They can be not fully seated in their groove or get creases in them and tear. Sometimes they'll get stiff with age, and that won't let them move as freely, all of which negatively affects performance. When it comes to tuning CV carbs, they share the same 3-circuit design with mechanical slide carbs, and we tune them in the same order. We always start with the pilot circuit because it will influence the lower end of the mid-range, but other circuits don't have an influence on it. This circuit consists of a pilot jet and a mixture screw that meters fuel. So turning it out gives more fuel, making it richer, and turning it in restricts fuel, leaning it out. Then we'll move over to the main circuit, which is simply controlled by the main jet. We do this next because it has a pretty significant impact on the mid-range circuit. So if you were to work on the mid-range before either of these, you'd likely be doing it again after. Finally, we'll finish up with the mid-range circuit. This involves the needle position, taper, and emulsion tube, in addition to some CV-specific parts like the slide spring and size of the vacuum hole in the bottom of the slide. We'll be tuning on this KZ1000 I have in the shop, starting with the mixture screw. The carbs have already been fully rebuilt and synchronized. The first thing to do is set the screws at a baseline 2.5 turns out from fully seated. On bikes with multiple carbs like this, make sure that you do the same thing to each carb as you go. The goal is to have them all working perfectly in unison. The adjustable range of most fuel screws is between 1 and 3.5 turns out. Be careful to lightly seat these screws because it's easy to over-tighten them and break the small tip off in the carb body, and getting them out can become your whole day. Now start the bike and set the idle around 12 to 1400 RPM for most bikes. With it warmed up, take it out to a flat road, coasting in second or third gear, and just give it a 20% turn of the throttle. If it lurches or has a flat spot before accelerating like normal, it's usually a sign of it being too rich. I just keep a little flathead screwdriver on me, lean the screws half a turn in, and try the test again. If it feels almost like it has a misfire at that throttle position and it bucks or surges, then it's probably too lean and you'll want to try richening it by going half a turn out. On most bikes, I end up between 1.5 and 2.5 turns out. You're looking for a smooth and quick response in acceleration when you go from coasting to 20% turn of the throttle. At this point, if you have pod filters or other mods with stock jets, then the bike probably won't be able to hit redline or even go past 50% throttle. But that's okay, we'll get to that soon. Now let's talk about the pilot jet. In the vast majority of situations, the pilot jet doesn't actually need to be changed for things like open exhaust or even an unrestricted intake, because the influence of those mods on airflow at idle is essentially zero, so the mixer screw has plenty of adjustment to correct for it. If you've done big engine upgrades like increasing bore, stroke, or compression that causes the engine to pull more air in, then it might need a bigger pilot jet to compensate. There are some bikes out there that are notoriously lean from the factory, like older Ninja 250s for example, and on those, even a bone stock one will benefit from a step up on the pilot jet. So check if it's a known issue for your bike, but otherwise, my advice is to just keep it stock. Once you have that smooth idle and acceleration up to 20% turn of the throttle, we're ready to work on the main circuit. Since CV carbs evolved alongside increasing EPA regulations for street bikes, they are generally tuned for maximum fuel efficiency. So removing the restrictive airbox and/or exhaust makes a huge impact on airflow, especially at wide open throttle. And because carbs don't automatically add more fuel when more air is added, modded engines will end up so lean that they can't even reach higher RPMs with stock main jets. However, on stock bikes, the jetting usually doesn't need to be changed. But with these common mods, it's safe to assume it's running far too lean. So start by going up on the main jet until the engine will rev to redline at wide open throttle in neutral. It'll probably hit a flat spot in the mid before getting there, but we'll smooth that out next. Once it'll rev out in neutral, take the bike out on an open road, ideally with an incline, and accelerate at wide open throttle. If it's still too lean, full throttle will act like a kill switch at worst, and as you get closer to the ideal ratio, it'll just struggle to maintain full throttle. On some bikes, I've had to go from a stock 108 up to a 150 main before it was happy, so don't worry about going several steps if it keeps acting like it's too lean. With every few jet sizes, you should be able to feel a notable improvement. Once it's close, you can get it dialed in with the same subtle off test that we described in our other tuning video. Now it's time to polish the mid-range circuit. Usually getting the main jet properly sized adds enough fuel throughout the mid-range to get it close, but you'll often find a flat spot somewhere between 20 to 80% throttle. You can almost always tune this out by adding a shim under the needle. There are specific needle shims that you can buy, but I usually use a fuel mixture screw washer that works just fine. By raising the needle with a shim, you effectively richen the fuel mixture through most of the mid-range. 2 shims should smooth out any lean spots throughout the mid. If you have to go more than 2 shims, then you probably still need to go up on your main jet. If shimming and main jets just aren't working and you've ruled out all the other factors that can affect tune, then there are some advanced jet kits that will include a drill bit to enlarge the vacuum slide hole, lighter slide springs, and even their own adjustable needle with custom taper. I don't recommend modifying any of these things using guesswork because they're very sensitive, and once you start cutting springs or drilling slides, it's hard to go back. If you followed all these steps and you still can't get your bike to run smoothly, then there's probably non-tuning related issues that are getting in the way, which we'll troubleshoot in another video, so stick around. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. It really helps us out and it lets YouTube know to show this content to others. I hope this helps, and ride safe.